question. Indeed, the construction of this expressway from Syokimau all the way to Westlands, commissioned by President Uhuru Kenyatta last week, has raised several concerns. Uhuru Park at the center of that, and those clips we just played a short while ago reminding Kenyans, especially of the role that was played by the late Wangari Maathai, who fought long and hard for the conservation of this park, ensuring no encroachment or development. And so perhaps with these plans underway, she would roll or turn in her grave, just seeing that all of that work, slowly, the chipping away of the park may just be beginning. And so this evening, we have also environmentalists in the show. I'm sure we'll get more into the environmental aspects and implication of all of this. But I have with me Constant Cap, who's an urban planner, to also paint for us a picture of just what also this means in the broader perspective of our transport system in the city and what the government says it wants to do with this expressway to decongest, to be able to ensure Mombasa Road, which is largely a nightmare, it's able to move a large portion, a chunk of that traffic from Mombasa Road to Westlands. It's talking about a public-private partnership. It's not another loan it's taking, it says. However, this will be managed by the China company, for about 30 years. And at a fee that when you use this expressway, you will have to pay. So, Cap, thank you for making time for us. Of course, you've been following debate around this planned construction. I wonder, on the face of it, what you make of these plans.
From a planning perspective, honestly speaking, it should not be a priority for the city. Mm-hmm. Our priority from mobility and transport point of view should be on how many people we can move per hour, per day across the city. This project will move 22,000 vehicles per day, as per the statistics that were released. Studies done into public transport systems on around the same corridor are projecting moving up to 500,000 people plus per day. Now, from almost social justice, from an economic perspective, what should our priority be? Our priority should be to move people as much as we can. There is no way a 27-kilometer road will decongest the city. Okay, we need to think more from a larger scale on how we can move people, putting people as our priority. 40 to 45% of the city walk as their primary mode of transport, 20% use personal vehicles, about 30% or 35% or so use public paratransit, basically matatus and other forms of public transport available. What should we be prioritizing? Are we prioritizing so much money for that 20%, or are we thinking of the bigger picture on how many more people we can move from one point to another?
Yeah, and I've seen part of the debate ensuing is that building expressway, like now we do to the highway, thicker highway, does not necessarily decongest. It may actually do the complete opposite and see more cars get on the road. Is that correct in your view?
Yes, that's true. There are two theories we have in urban planning. One is Borges' theory that says that the more you increase a road network, the more you attract vehicles to use it. The other one is a joke that we say if you expand a road to reduce congestion, is like widening your belt to say that you have reduced weight as a person. And that's the truth. We've seen it with thicker road. We saw what happened when we increased the lane on Mombasa Road. We did not see any improvement per se in peak hour traffic, because the priority again is not moving people.
The environmental aspect, and let's touch on Uhuru Park for a moment now. What is the implication in your view? Because it's biting and eating into that, and also there's concerns about the emissions. Are they significant in your view?
The environmental aspect is very unfortunate because, first of all, we've just had the global climate change conference in New York, where we talked about less carbon in urban centers. We have Kenya and Nairobi have signed up to the new urban agenda, which also talks of increased sustainable ways of planning our cities. We are talking about an extra maybe 22,000 vehicles. You can imagine the amount of carbon emissions that emits to the city. Uhuru Park is a green space in the city. It is a very valuable aspect, both from a point of view aesthetically, also from the point of view of it being a recreation ground for many of the urban poor who do not have public spaces within their neighborhoods. Okay, over 40% we have over 210 informal settlements in the city. These people do not have recreation grounds. Uhuru Park, Central Park, those are their few recreation grounds. Now, the minute we start eating into that, and we know how the kind of tendencies we've had in this country where we bite into public spaces and before you know it, the entire space has disappeared for one reason or another. We cannot afford to even hive off 1 centimeter squared of that particular green space.
Yeah. And you were talking to me just about how in other parts of the country, even when they had constructed this kind of expressways or highways, they are now undoing what they done because it did not achieve what was intended. Could that be Kenya?
Yeah, that has happened and is still happening. You know, the most common one is in Seoul, South Korea, where in 2003, an elevated highway and the highway were both removed because it was realized that they were not reducing congestion at all. And what was interesting with that particular highway is it had been built on top of a river, and now they've built a very nice green space and improved their public transport, and realized that you know, we've actually made people be able to move around the city much easier. You know, you improve your non-motorized transit facilities, you facilities for walking and cycling, you improve your public transport facilities, then you make it easier for people to move around. In Madrid, they've also done that on one of the intersections. In Portland, they removed an elevated highway. In San Francisco, in 1991, they completely destroyed one after it had been partly damaged during the 89 earthquake. And they realized that, you know, having it was not improving their transport conditions. So it is something that has happened. Also, I think it's Hudson Bay in New York, where they had to remove an elevated highway and replace it with better non-motorized transport facilities. Yeah. So we could just be finding ourselves within that particular problem once the Chinese have ripped off their money from the toll charges, which also are questionable, because the reason toll charges were removed in the 90s was because we came up with the fuel levy fee. Remember, we used to have, you know, highway toll on Thika Road, I think it was Nakuru, Naivasha, somewhere near the river. Those were removed and put to the fuel levy fee. So where is the element of social justice now that we are prioritizing? First of all, prioritizing the personal vehicles, and then charging people on top of that, and then giving people an environmental injustice by emitting carbon increasing our carbon emissions in the city.
Yeah, and there is talk that the Chinese could in very fact want the situation of more cars playing out because they're looking to dispose, quote unquote.
Yeah, recently we had a discussion on BBC World Service where the topic of China getting rid of their selling second-hand vehicles to other countries, and one of the target countries which they've been selling to is Nigeria recently, and there was also Vietnam, and Kenya was also on the list of one of the countries they're thinking of selling vehicles. So like happened in Colombia, where the Japanese proposed 3 elevated highways so that they could sell more of their cars to the residents there, and fortunately the mayor stopped that project and replaced it with a good public transport system. Yeah. This could be linked to that, you know, increase the need, because there's a desire by many people to own a vehicle, and a vehicle is not something bad, you know, it's good for long distance travel and such. But if we want to increase the number of vehicles on our roads, what are we doing about we're just making the existing congestion even worse.
Yeah. But from an urban planning perspective, we do have a problem. The gridlock, the traffic jams, the man-hours being wasted, the billions of shillings we're losing is all a big issue. The government claims this is one of the possible solutions to that. From your view, of course, the same government had intended to do a BRT. We saw painting of roads that we had of car-free days in Nairobi. That was shelved. So in your view, what needs to happen? What's more urgent to resolve the current problem we face?
We need to think about how we can prioritize non-motorized transit and public transport, first of all, and also do something about our land use management. Those, you know, transportation and mobility and land use management are directly related to each other, because people come from work and go home, or come from home and go to school, etc., etc. So we need to do that from also a local perspective. Let's engage people at ward level in the kind of urban planning they want within their wards. But when I know you've mentioned the topic of transport and mobility and gridlock per se, let's prioritize public transport systems. Let's have multimodal ways of moving. I move around the city on a bicycle. It takes me 10 minutes from Westlands to town.
And is it even safe?
Well, the only accident I've had is with a pedestrian. and there are many people who do that. If we had safe cycling lanes, if we had good public transport, then we would not be discussing the idea of gridlock. If we could also manage our traffic, a city of 5 million people where traffic is being managed manually by policemen.
Even where there are lights.
Even where there are lights. Then obviously, in today's date when everything can be automized, then we should ask ourselves questions about that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Constant Cap is an urban planner, and so definitely important to interrogate as these plans are underway. The government looking to start this project by this month, they said, and it will take about 2 years. But other than those environmental critical aspects that I'm sure you'll be discussing with our other guests in studio tonight, it looks like there is so much more that could have been explored by government to resolve the real issue of moving people from point A to point B without and prioritizing, putting priorities in the right place. And as far as the numbers you're dealing with, we just had from CAP that a bigger percentage is those that are walking and using public transport as opposed to those driving personal vehicles.